The Whispers in the Woods. It was supposed to be a peaceful weekend, a quick getaway from the stresses of the city. Sarah had been looking forward to it for weeks. An isolated cabin in the woods, far from anyone or anything. No emails, no calls, no distractions, just her and the tranquil sounds of nature. The cabin was small, nestled between towering pine trees. It had a rustic charm to it with wooden beams and a stone fireplace. There was something comforting about it, as if it had been untouched for years. The windows were large, offering an expansive view of the dark forest surrounding it, the kind of place you could lose yourself in. The first night was perfect. Sarah sat on the porch, sipping wine, watching the sun dip behind the trees. The air was cool, and the chirping of crickets filled the silence. As darkness settled in, she started a fire in the stone hearth and curled up with a book, feeling the weight of the world slowly slip away. But then it began. A faint rustling. At first she thought it was just the wind, or perhaps an animal moving through the underbrush, but the sound came again, louder this time. It wasn't the sound of wind or wildlife. It was deliberate, rhythmic, like footsteps. She stood up, her heart suddenly racing. The forest around her was still, the trees motionless in the moonlight. There was no one there. Shrugging it off as her mind playing tricks, she returned to her book, but the feeling of being watched never went away. The next day, Sarah explored the woods around the cabin. The trees were dense, their trunks thick and gnarled, their branches twisting upward like skeletal hands. The silence was deafening. She walked deeper into the woods, feeling a strange pull as if something were calling her forward. It wasn't until she came across a small, forgotten clearing that she felt something was wrong. In the center of the clearing stood an old, weathered stone well. The kind you'd expect to see in a horror movie, dark and foreboding. The stone was cracked, covered in moss and lichen, and there was a faint smell of earth and decay in the air. The rope that once might have used to pull up water was long gone, replaced by a strange, pulsing darkness that seemed to emanate from the well itself. Curiosity tugged at her. She approached the edge, peering down into the abyss. But before she could make sense of the strange, suffocating feeling creeping up her spine, a sudden voice broke the stillness. "Don't look too long." The voice was low, barely a whisper, but it cut through the air like a knife. Sarah spun round, her breath catching in her throat. Standing at the edge of the clearing was an old woman. Her hair was white, hanging in tangled strands around her face. Her clothes were ragged, as if they'd been torn by thorns or brambles, and her eyes, they were wide, unblinking, filled with the kind of terror that Sarah couldn't quite understand. Who are you?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. The old woman didn't answer. She just stared at Sarah, a grim expression on her face as if she had seen something terrible in the future. And then, in a voice just above a whisper, she said, "The forest knows you. It remembers you." Before Sarah could respond, the woman turned and disappeared into the trees, vanishing as suddenly as she had appeared. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, the wind howling outside, the trees swaying against the cabin. But what kept her awake wasn't the storm. It was the sound of whispers, soft, unintelligible murmurs that seemed to come from the walls themselves. She thought about the old woman and her cryptic warning, "The forest knows you. It remembers you." The whispers grew louder. They echoed through the cabin, filling every corner of the room. She clutched her pillow, trying to block out the sound, but it was no use. It was as if they were all inside her mind, clawing at the edges of her sanity. And then, just as suddenly as they started, the whispers stopped. But the silence that followed wasn't comforting. It was suffocating. The next morning, Sarah went to the clearing again, hoping the fresh air and sunlight would clear her head. As she reached the well, she noticed something strange. a new set of footprints in the dirt around it, fresh, barefoot, and they led directly to the edge of the well. Her heart raced. She stepped closer, peering into the darkness below, but she couldn't see anything. The feeling of dread that had settled on her chest the night before returned in full force. The whispering began again, louder this time. It came from inside the well. "Help me," the voice pleaded. "Please, help me." Without thinking, Sarah took a step forward and looked down into the well. Her breath caught in her throat as she saw something or someone moving in the darkness. A face, pale and gaunt, with hollow eyes that seemed to stare straight into her soul. The face was twisted in a silent scream, the mouth contorted as if trying to say something, but no sound came out. Sarah stumbled back, her hands shaking. She tried to turn and run, but something held her in place. The ground beneath her feet seemed to shift, as if the forest itself was alive, pulling her closer to the well. And then she heard the voice again. This time it was not pleading. It was mocking. "Don't leave yet, Sarah. We've only just begun." That night, Sarah couldn't escape the feeling of being watched. The whispers followed her everywhere she went. They seeped through the walls, the floors, the air itself, and every time she closed her eyes, she saw the face in the well staring back at her. Desperate, she decided to leave. She packed her things and grabbed her car keys, intending to drive back to the city, but when she stepped outside, the forest had changed. The trees seemed closer now, their branches reaching towards her like arms. Her car wouldn't start. In a panic, Sarah ran towards the road, hoping to flag down a passing car, but the path that would once clear was now overgrown with thick vines and brambles. The road had vanished. Her breath came in shallow gasps as she stumbled back towards the cabin, the dark forest closing in around her. She was trapped. The forest wasn't just alive, it was alive with memory, and it remembered her. She could feel it now, the cold grip of something ancient, something malevolent, tightening around her chest. The forest was feeding on her fear, using it to draw her deeper into its web. It was as if the trees themselves were whispering her name, calling her to come closer, to remember. And then she saw it, the woman from the clearing standing at the edge of the woods. Her eyes were wide with terror, but this time she didn't speak. Instead, she pointed at the cabin. Sarah's heart sank. The truth hit her like a cold wave. She wasn't alone. And she hadn't been alone for a long time. In the darkness, she could see them now. The figures hidden among the trees, faces in the shadows, watching, waiting. The forest had never forgotten her. It had been waiting for her to return. Sarah turned and ran back to the cabin, her footsteps pounding in the dirt. She knew she couldn't escape. The forest would never let her go. The whispers grew louder, more frantic, until they were all she could hear. And then in the midst of the chaos, a single voice broke through. "Help me, Sarah." Sarah never made it out of the woods. Some say she disappeared into the forest, consumed by the darkness that lurks within. Others say she's still out there, somewhere, lost amongst the trees, forever haunted by the whispers that never stop. But one thing is for certain, the forest remembers, and it never forgets. The end. Well, that was a chilling tale, wasn't it? The woods can be scary. I happen to love the woods, but they can be scary. I hope you enjoyed this story. Again, I'm doing this every day for the month of October. They are titled October Fright Month. If you're interested in going back and listening to the stories, feel free. Feel free to share them with your friends. And as always, my friend loves